Hello and welcome to episode 84 of Friends of the Show. I am Stephen W. Skinner, and this is my podcast where I speak with the coolest of the internet. This week's friend is the co-host of a wildly stupid and popular podcast called The Worst Idea of All Time. But before that, he was a traveling comedian who passed through Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and ran into a young me. I happily made his acquaintance, and years later, we reconnect on this podcast. I'm talking, of course, about Guy Halifax Montgomery, New Zealander and charming lad. I had a great time reconnecting with Guy, and I hope you'll have a great time listening to us reconnecting on Friends of the Show, episode 84, with Guy Montgomery.
Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Guy. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm really excited to be talking to you.
Oh, likewise. I'm just sending a quick email. I hope that's...
No, it's good. I love it. I love business happening in real time, audio.
Yeah.
This is real life. The listeners love it. It's a little sneak behind the curtains. Now we know what your keyboard taps sound like.
That's right. I want to own...
You don't have to try to talk while you're writing the email. That's why I was talking. Because
verbal. Yeah, but you think you just talking over me?
Oh, right. That's equally as bad. Maybe I should just we'll just let you finish the email. We'll just sit quietly.
I'm doing something practical, which is outlining what I want to say in the email.
Right. So just make those notes, and I'll just work here. I'll make some notes on this pen of paper. Let's see if I can you hear me writing?
Yeah, big time.
Oh, the pen ran out of ink.
Fucking pens, man. You can't trust them.
Pins?
Pens.
Oh, pens. Yeah. This is an Air Canada pen, and yeah, it just died.
Yeah, you can't trust pens.
I don't hear typing.
Yeah, that's right. I sent an email. And then I didn't even tell you about this, but secretly I then sent a text to the person I emailed to say I've just sent you an email.
Oh, sick. That's like instant notification, right? It's like a two-factor.
Their email's turned off, but they get their texts.
Yes, it's perfect. It's like clear. Guy.
Should I start recording this?
You don't have to. I can handle it. You sound fine.
No, but I'm going to send you my audio.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a double ender in the biz, right?
Well, yeah, because this will sound like my Skype audio will sound bad, but if I'm recording this on a Shure SM58 into a Tascam. Oof. And if I send you that and you stitch it up, I'm assuming you're using a microphone on your end.
I'm using a Shure SM57, so not quite. It's one below, right?
Keep going. I'm the 300th podcast. Sure, send the SM58. I've started my audio recording now, so you know.
Okay, great. So now, how do I sync it up? What do I have to do?
What we could do is a countdown from 6. And so you'd start with 6, then I'd say 5, then you'd say 4, then I'd say 3, then you'd say 2, then I'd say 1.
Oh, cool. Do we do that now?
Yeah, if you like. I mean, it's your podcast. But
well, I've never done the double ender. I have asked people to record, and I tried to do it, but I couldn't. I didn't do a countdown. I fucked it up with no countdown. So now we're gonna do the countdown where we do every alternating number, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me try this. 6,
5,
4,
3,
2,
1.
Podcast.
Nice.
Is that what you say? You say?
That's what I do. Yeah. I know that other people did that as well.
Podcast. That's great. Thank you so much for doing that. This might be the best audio. It might be the best audio of all the podcast episodes that I've done.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to this. I haven't listened to it. I'm sorry, I didn't get time. I usually try to listen to the podcast before I appear on it. But
no, I'm glad.
Do I need to know anything about it?
No, this is version 2.0, guys. So, yeah, we had the old podcast back in 2016, I think. It ran for, I don't know, 80 or not 80, but 70 episodes, 50 to 70 episodes. And it was, that we had tweets. It was it was formulaic. We followed a certain pattern. We talked about the person, then we got into their tweets, and then we did tweets that they enjoyed, and then we wrapped it up by questions from Twitter. So people on Twitter send in questions, and that's what we did. It was a whole format. It followed that every single time. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot more work than this modern format, which is just show up and go up, make a few bullet points. Hopefully the conversation doesn't stall on your dumb bullet points if you ask the wrong question, but hopefully it should be fine. Yeah, I think it should be fine because, I mean, I've got a lot of stuff to talk to you about because we've met in person. This is one of the rare Twitter connections that I've also looked at in the eye in real life, which is strange because of how seemingly far away you are.
Well, I am now.
Right, currently.
There were times when we were in the same room.
Yes, very close proximity. Even I was on a chair and you were on a couch, like right beside. Yeah. That happened.
There's no denying it. Can I ask, first of all?
Yes.
Is this in the podcast, this conversation?
Yeah. Should we start back? I think we'll have to start at this.
Some podcasts just like, they say that, I don't know. Some people, they say, okay, and we start the podcast now. And then in some podcasts, it's just people talking. And then, it's like a sneak attack. And then you're like, oh, God damn, I thought we were just having a conversation.
Yeah. Because I used to do it. I used to do it the other way, where I did a real intro, like this week's friend is Guy Montgomery, a hilarious comedian from New Zealand whose credits include his hilarious podcast, The Worst Idea of All Time, among other great credits, something like that. And then I'd be like, welcome to the podcast, Guy.
Yeah, but I see you've embraced modernity to the point that we're doing, like, even now when I asked, I couldn't get a straight answer. Even then, you just told me how you used to do it without articulating what you do now.
Now I just press record, and from the jump is when we go.
Okay.
So it's probably even going to have the pre 6-second countdown stuff too.
Okay. So we're podcasting right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the email shit in. I'm gonna leave the texting your buddy in.
Oh man, that's crazy. Okay, well, it's good to know.
Real anti-professional. Is that what you're trying to get?
No, I like it. It doesn't actually impact how we behave, but I wanted to know because I see we've been in a room together, and you were even more specific. You said that you were on a chair, and I was. I have a
vivid memory of.
I want to know more about this.
It was at Comedy Bar. I have a vivid memory. We were at Comedy Bar. I don't remember who else. I know there was a couple other people. Maybe Jordan Foisey was there, and we're sitting in. Now they've completely renovated this area that we were sitting in. Now there's like. A long, thin table and those like stools, like fixed stools.
Yeah, we've got that format for seating in New Zealand as well. I've seen it.
Yeah. But before in the old Comedy Bar outside the cabaret space, there was like a couch. There was like a little couch seating area underneath the TV. That's where we were sitting. I was in the head chair, and you were on the couch. And there's a couple other comedians hanging out. That's the picture in my mind that I have.
And what were we doing? Were we shooting the shit?
Yeah, we were shooting the shit. I was quite enthralled with your world traveler demeanor and your tall confidence, etc. And I was like, yeah, this guy is clearly a guy to know, like a really cool, fun guy. I found my skill was like picking out who the good, funny people were back then, so I could hang around in the scene and be I know who the good guys are.
Had to develop and use that skill when I went to New York. And right. You are correct in that all of my confidence derives from my height and all of my demeanor derives from being a world traveler, as you say.
Right. Well, that definitely gives you some cachet, right? You can't deny that. I mean, your accent is undeniable,
yes.
Right? straight off the bat.
Only outside of New Zealand is it undeniable. In New
Correct.
Zealand,
Right. Yes.
people don't even think of it as an accent at all.
Right, but we're talking about World Traveler Guy. So when did that? So let's bring it back. This is the Mark Maron part. Where are you from? Who are your guys? So where are you from? Who are your guys? So let's take it back to the beginning. Growing up in New Zealand.
Yes.
Mountains.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We've got them. We've got mountains. We've got coastline. We have cities, towns, rivers, streams. We've got it all.
Yeah, that's very diverse. A very diverse geography.
That's right. And I grew up in Christchurch, New Zealand, which is did you watch the Nickelodeon cartoon show Rocket Power?
No.
Neither.
I don't think Nickelodeon was not a Canadian channel.
It's also, I mean, it's not a New Zealand channel either, Stephen, but we found a way.
Yeah, well, was it picked up on NZ1 or whatever?
No, we were. I was lucky enough to have cable.
Oh, nice.
As a boy.
That's pretty sweet.
But I remember that in this show, the children lived in a town. They were all into extreme sports, adventure sports, and they lived in a town that meant that they could surf in the morning and go snowboarding in the afternoon. And I thought, that's crazy.
That's cool.
I know. But then I realized technically in Christchurch that option is also available to you. You'd have to be very committed, and I was not, and I can't really surf nor snowboard. I can ski, but I grew up in Christchurch where I was funny. But
at what age? Forever?
Immediately from memory.
Where did you get it from? Do you know? In retrospect, have you thought about it? Was like, oh yeah, my dad was funny, or like
my dad is funny.
Yeah.
He was funny, and
he was growing up.
I didn't know he was funny until I was like in the middle of my teenage years. I'd spent a lot of the time thinking he was kind of scary.
Yeah.
But then I realized he'd been joking the whole time, and like,
just a dry.
Often to amuse himself.
That's funny.
And there was a sort of a worm turning point where I was like, oh, this guy's just kidding around. And my mum is that funny in a different way. Mum's like, mum's bigger.
Okay.
Her comedy,
like silly,
bigger, more broad. Yeah, like silly, and just sort of. Dad's more like sly.
Yeah.
And he's more wordy. And I like to think I've taken from both of them. But
yeah, that's a great combo.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't like. I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I just like remember all I really wanted was to be funny, and like I remember in early conversations. Well, I don't remember the conversations. I remember like in my head when I'd get a laugh or like filing away a big laugh, and like revisiting the feeling of making people laugh and taking a lot of pleasure in that, and like sitting in it for long. I mean, I didn't really think about what was normal relative to other kids, but like I still have memories now of feeling proud of myself for getting laughs. Or like, when I'd go to sleep at night, I would often, in my memory, what I'd be rehashing before I fell asleep were like the funniest moments of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And that definitely will reinforce trying to seek out that behavior, get that serotonin, dopamine release or whatever. Yeah, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So you were funny, getting laughs. Do you remember any specific like big laughs that you got that was like, okay, that was it?
Not like.
Do you remember like making a friend laugh? Like I have a memory of making my friend and like this summer nanny who would like watch us during the summer, like laugh so much that the SpaghettiOs came out of their nose.
Oh, yeah. I have memories of that sort of experience. I don't remember what I did. Like I remember dinner.
Just remember the reaction.
We'd eat dinner as a family, and I'm a middle child between two sisters, and every meal, my goal was always to make my little sister laugh so hard she had to get up from the table and go and like sort of semi-regurgitate a mouthful into the sink because I'd cracked her so hard.
Uh-huh.
And we mum and dad loved having we had a revolving door of like we always had people coming over for dinner or whatever.
Nice.
And I'd always like
for salons.
Yeah. I'd always try and it was showing off, but like if it was called showing off to me at the time, that would be incredibly deflating. Like there's no more demeaning feeling than being accused of showing off when you're in the middle of showing off.
Yeah.
As a boy.
As a kid, yeah.
But like I remember I had one vivid recollection of I would have been in high school, and my sister and my dad were really into they're horse people. You know, I didn't know that a horse girl was a phenomenon until I was online in the last like 5 years.
Definitely.
But my oldest sister was a horse girl.
Okay.
And they'd have like their horse friends for dinner. Sometimes we'd have people over for dinner who I thought were interesting, and then sometimes we'd have horse people, and they'd just talk about horses.
Yeah.
And the whole meal, and I'd be like furious because I'd be like, this is so, like, there's no entry point for me here. This is so boring and selfish. And once we had some horse people over, and I was about 14 or 15, and I was like, I don't know these people, and these people don't know me, and I'm going to pretend to be an exchange student from South Africa.
Okay.
And so for this whole like family dinner we were having, I was doing, this. I had a South African maths teacher at the time, and we used to ape his accent at school. And I just started doing the accent and saying I was like on exchange from Cape Town, and the people were sort of wrong-footed. They were a bit confused, and Mum kept being like, "No, he's not. That's some guy." But I just wouldn't break for the whole meal. I kept saying, "Why are you doing this? I can't believe you'd lie about it." And then it kept going to the point that like, and this was another sort of aspirational response I wanted. Is like when a parent, like my mum, got so angry. She was so angry with me, but also she couldn't stop laughing in spite of herself, so she couldn't actually like capture just the anger.
Yeah. And
she chased me, like she sort of got up eventually and chased me around the table with these guests there. He picked up like the knife sharpener and was chasing me around the kitchen with the knife sharpener. He didn't strike me with everything. And then I ran away and like locked myself in my room. And I remember that was a big, like, I was getting big that night.
That was a turning point for sure. Committing to the bit is an important lesson, I think, that you learned was important.
Yeah, I think committing to the bit is one of the most powerful tools. It takes such like self-confidence.
Yeah, that's what it is.
As soon as you're committed, it can bomb. But it sort of, you're impervious to the bomb. It doesn't matter so much because you're in it.
Yeah, you're doing it. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You committed. You don't give up. Don't wink to the audience.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. So growing up in New Zealand, super funny. And then when did you say, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go be a world traveler?
I never said that. I sort of thought it.
Oh, wait. I had so what's the key to a South African accent before we move past South African accents?
I can't actually do that. It's, the key is to be young enough to believe that you're doing a good job. As it is in so much in life.
Yeah. Just fake it till you make it is what we're saying.
Yeah. I don't know. You sort of just change your voice. Like it's nothing.
A lot of people do that, yeah.
It's just like
it's like stilted kind of cadence, like a stilted cadence, and that's South African.
Yeah, I'm alienating your diehard South African listeners.
Our Cape Town crew is rock solid. Yeah. They know we're just joking around.
Attacking me on Twitter. But so I was school. My friends and I, all we wanted to do was be funny, and we were neither popular nor unpopular. We were mostly just amusing ourselves and each other. And then left school and sort of, I went to quite a proper school, like an Anglican uniformed all boys school.
Okay, some like serious school stuff.
Yeah, which sort of meant that it's Christchurch is one of its points of pride traditionally is that it's because we got colonized here in New Zealand, and Christchurch's great point of pride is they got colonized the hardest.
Oh no,
it's the most British.
Right. Yeah.
They're sort of working through what this means at the moment in real time, but basically it meant that the school was modelled on like British public schools.
Yeah.
Which are like in Britain, a public school was actually a private school. I don't understand how they got that.
Right, that old tricky switcheroo.
So wrong.
Yeah,
but there's nothing at school to suggest that you could actually do anything that wasn't one of the traditional jobs you might be able to get on the Game of Life or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And so left school and just kept mostly just wanting to be funny. And then it wasn't until I did a Bachelor of Arts at University in Wellington, and then it wasn't until after that when I had a lot of friends who'd also gone to university started getting their jobs. And I'd been working in hospitality and promotions and a few media odds and ends, but just scraping together a life which meant that I felt like I had a lot of control over my working hours.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be free, to be able to drop everything to go and play backyard cricket or just this prolonged adolescence kind of.
Yes.
And then everyone started getting jobs, and I was looking around and I was thinking, I'm in trouble here. I've got no aspirations. I've got no idea how I'm actually going to apply myself in life. And so I thought about it in terms of what do I like doing the best, and what am I the best at doing? And wherever those two, met on a graph, I thought I'll work towards that as a goal.
Yeah, you booted up your Excel, started plunking in the data.
What's it called? What's it called when two things? Is it the market
It's
equilibrium?
a Venn diagram.
A Venn diagram, or a Venn diagram. And the middle of the Venn diagram was being funny, and it was a big middle.
Yeah, nice.
And I thought, well, I was always too shy to try comedy really in New Zealand because I couldn't so much of my self-identity at that point was that I was funny.
Yeah, you couldn't fail. I couldn't crush that.
I couldn't stomach the humiliation of trying to be funny publicly the one time that you're expressly meant to be funny and not being funny.
Yeah, when it's you're not on stage, you can be funny or not be funny, and it's fine. But on stage, you're like
and it's also it's sort of it's quite New Zealand, I think. It's the biggest put down in New Zealand is to call someone a try-hard, which is sort of encapsulates our self-defeating nature as a people. It's it's humiliating to find something you care about and apply yourself to that thing because you risk humiliation. And so it's everyone just sputters through life quite self-satisfied in their mediocrity because they've not actually chanced anything.
Yeah.
And that sort of still impacted me. And so I was like, well, I want to try comedy. I don't know where to try comedy. I sort of watched a bit of. I knew I liked stand-up, but I wasn't devoted to it. I just liked comedy, watching comedy films and TV or whatever. But
anything funny, not just specifically stand-up.
Yeah,
one person in a microphone.
I was like, okay, stand-up's the route I'm going to go here. I don't know where they do stand-up apart from America. And there's a big comedy festival in Montreal.
The biggest.
And I know one person in Montreal.
Okay.
That's where I got it. That's where I got to go.
That's it.
Yeah. And so I saved. I put together all the money I had. It's very easy to get a visa between countries in the Commonwealth.
Right.
So I got a 1-year visa, and I moved to Montreal in the summer before Just for Laughs. And I watched a lot of shows, and I lived on my friend's couch, and I got a job as a busser working at a sushi restaurant.
Okay.
And I went to some shows, and I tried to start doing comedy at the open mics in Montreal, but I found it quite hard because there weren't as many as I imagined, and a lot of the scene was in French. Mm. And I started doing a few gigs, and I was having a really good time, but I wasn't making a huge amount of headway.
Right.
And then I had a friend who was going to visit. They were going to visit one of their friends in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And they're like, do you want to come check out Toronto? And I thought, absolutely. I've never been to Toronto before. And so I sort of emailed. I started making friends with comedians on Facebook, and some people in Montreal told me who to contact, or put me in touch. I don't actually know exactly how I put the pieces together, but I pretty much went and lined up a gig a night for a week in Toronto, including the most memorable was Steve Patrick Adams and Jordan Foisey, the aforementioned, put on a show. And I somehow, weaseled my way onto that. And I remember I was so green, and I saw those guys, and I thought, and the whole tone of that show, and I was like, this is really cool. Yeah. And getting up on stage every night, it was incredibly addictive and Moorish. And I realized when I was in Toronto that that's where I needed to be.
Yeah, definitely more shows, and they're speaking English.
Exactly. So I packed up from Montreal and I caught a bus back to Toronto.
Yeah.
And I got the first day, the first place I went into to ask for a job was a cafe, and the guy said, he said, we had a New Zealander working here who left last week. He was the best employee I've ever had. You're hired. And I thought, holy shit, that's pretty lucky.
Yeah.
And then that's, I think this is like 2012, summer
Yeah,
of
2012.
2012, and that's when that's sort of, to my eyes, when I really started fucking holing into some serious comedy.
Holy shit. So I saw the birth of the Guy Montgomery, the comedian, back in those days. I think I was at that Foisey and Steve Patrick Adams show. Two of my favorites. Steve Patrick Adams has now moved from Toronto to Montreal in an interesting...
I see that. I've performed with him in Montreal, since many years later, since all this occurred.
Yeah, he's so good.
But yeah, Toronto was where I really got started, and I didn't know any, I knew that one guy in Montreal, who I'm still friends with to this day. But in Toronto, I didn't know anyone, and so the only means I had of socializing was I would go to I got very obsessed with numbers. I'd set myself, I'd say I'd do a minimum of 10 gigs a week.
Yeah.
So I'd go and I did every dive, every fucking open mic out the back of a taco restaurant.
Yeah.
And that's how I met a lot of other, a lot of other comics who were coming up then. It was also my first time sort of traveling by myself. And so it was an incredibly romantic and just alluring time where it was I was making friends, I was falling in love with comedy, and all the other people I knew, all the people I was meeting and becoming friends with were also falling in love with comedy. And there are people who you'd share a comic sensibility with, or you'd be drawn to, and then you'd become friends with them. And I was there for the rest of my visa, and then I had a job opportunity in New Zealand that I left for. But that was I still sort of, I feel a huge connection and affinity to Toronto's stand-up comedy scene, and I still love performing there. I've come back a few times since I kept going. I came back. I moved to since I've come back to New Zealand. I left for New York, and then I've again moved back to New Zealand. But when I was in New York, I came up and did a bunch of shows, and then got to do JFL 42 one year. And year I was there, the year JFL 42 started in Toronto. And
I think we met up briefly during that. Yeah. Came and said hi.
Yeah. And it was just I still think it's such an incredible comedy city, and the comedians there are so good. The stand-up comedy is so good. But there's it's not dissimilar to New Zealand. I think when you reach a ceiling, you can reach a ceiling of what is available to you there quite quickly.
Yeah. And
that is a frustrating experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, same thing happens just on a different scale here in Toronto, where you're you can make it to the top of Toronto and be one of the best in Toronto, but that ceiling is pretty low. Right? At some point, you're gonna have to go to New York or LA and try your hand at that if you want, or just keep it low key and stay here and get a job writing for some TV show or whatever on CBC Gem. You can do that too. Those are basically the options, right? But the ceiling is there. It's you can only do so much once you make it to the top of the Toronto scene. It's not, it's not quite the top of the LA scene, right?
No, but I mean, not in terms of I don't know what the metrics for success are. But
it's being able to earn a comfortable living, right?
I think it's fine. In terms of quality, the thing, especially in America, I find it so crazy. The best comedians in America are generally the best, some of the very, very best in the world, the top 1% in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's obviously some very solid professional comedians beneath them.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you get down to, say, below the top 10%, there's just, because there's so many people doing it, the number of people who are doing it who are abysmal is sensational.
Yeah.
There are so many bad comedians. I would say, in terms of percentages, the quality of comedy in Toronto was, way higher.
Mhm.
And then also like the best comedians in Toronto, I guess there's a certain element of home field, but I feel like they'd be the best, like the best comedians in any given city, generally speaking, would be close to the best at any other city they went to visit.
Yeah, definitely those, like, if they went to, I'm sure any other, like, Canadian city, they'd probably be right up there. And then probably a lot of, like, the middle America cities, middling America.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
like New York, though, it's like I've seen a couple of top Toronto people go to New York and try and just get, like, ground down by the
Yeah.
New York scene. Like, it's too hard to make that leap sometimes. Like, and other people try to do the LA way, and it's different because getting around in LA is different and the shows are different. So it's like,
Yeah. Like in
pick your
LA,
poison.
it's difficult. If you don't move to LA to make it in stand up.
Yeah,
Really,
true.
like it's a
You should go to New York
conduit
first.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree. I went to New York and I was like, I sort of told myself that I'd already done this in Toronto and I'd started from nothing and like ground out these open mics and made friends. And, I didn't achieve anything when I was there, but I started getting to do some fun gigs and like felt like I had momentum and traction.
Mm-hmm.
But in New York, it was just totally different. Like I'd already achieved success in New Zealand and a little in Australia, and sort of like had developed some minor form of ego or self-confidence, which meant that I could no longer stomach or withstand the volume of
You can't go back to the
just,
very bottom rung.
yeah, the open-minded,
open-ended
nature of grinding out open mics.
Yeah. That's a lot. Like you can do that, but you can't do it and then start again at the bottom. Like it's so hard after you've already done the grind to go back and be like the first or the second rung. Even if you have like a leg up and you're on the second rung where you get booked on some shows, you still have to do those open mics like once or twice a week to like stay tight and to keep getting up there, right? Like you can't not do it, otherwise the muscle atrophies or whatever. You lose lose a bit of your zip. You got to work it back. So
and you got to keep that zip.
You got to keep the zip, man. So that's pretty good that you have. I see you're down there in New Zealand. You're killing it now. You're a known entity. You're a media personality. Your IMDb is popping. I should do a Mark Maron scroll of your IMDb. Look at all this stuff. There's so much stuff now. Holy cow! Writer, producer, self. Look at all these things.
I love one of my favorite roles I play on shows is self.
Self. Look at that. Self, dream team member. Self, panelist. Self, host. Self. Self, host.
I love playing self with as panelist.
You played self on a TV series. No experience necessary. How about that?
I did. That was cool. That was a show idea, which I still think is so brilliant. From a friend of mine, an Australian comedian who's in London now, called Ray Badrin, who's like one of the most. He's a brilliant stand-up, but off stage as well, he's just one of the most naturally funny people I know. He is an exhausting conversational partner because he just like he is unrelenting in his desire to make jokes.
Love it.
And it was a show idea built around the idea that he was coming to New Zealand to make a sitcom because he thought it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
But he didn't think, it's sort of a slightly high concept, but basically he was coming to New Zealand to make a sitcom because he thought it was cheaper, but he didn't think that they had camera equipment or anything in New Zealand. So he flew over all this camera equipment and like pretty much spent all of the money he had for the show relocating to New Zealand. And so then had to cast the show through Trade Me, which is like Craigslist.
Right. And casting crew.
So he was going to star in this family sitcom. And the only person he knew in New Zealand was me, and he had to wind up casting the sitcom through Craigslist.
Nice.
Casting all these people to play his family, and so it was this like hybrid show where our scenes and like some of the stuff around the actual sitcom and the casting were contrived, but the casting process and the actual sitcom at the end was all real. Like we used real people and real.
Oh wow, that's a really cool idea. Like half pseudo reality or like like a Nathan Fielder reality, and then half scripted comedy. Wow, that's really neat.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah, doing a lot of stuff. Self. You even did your Comedy Central stand up.
Oh yeah, I did. So before I left New York. I don't know, between living in between after moving to New York, I somehow fell in love with a woman who is still my partner, who I live with now in New Zealand. But she was in New Zealand.
Ooh.
Uh, and so before, for no pandemic reasons, I left New York in December 2019.
Oh wow, good
And
timing.
in that very month, I got to do a Comedy Central mix taping in Austin, Texas, which was like such a, like I
Yeah.
was so overwhelmed with gratitude and grateful for the opportunity, and did it, and was so satisfied to get some sort of American credit. And I had this grand imagining of being able to go back to America,
Yeah, you get a new credit. You get a new half hour
and
every year or whatever, right?
well, no, I knew how far, but I don't know. I guess I imagined I'd be able to leave, well, broadly speaking, New Zealand, but more
Right.
specifically, given current circumstances, my house.
Yes.
But as it stands, no.
No. So, global elephant in the room, the current global COVID-19 pandemic. If you're listening in the far future, we're still in the middle of it. And in New Zealand, you hadn't really had to deal with it too much. You did really good at the beginning, and then what now? There's a little bit of a backtrack and a hard lockdown.
That's right. Yeah. So we went gangbusters, but we sort of like put up we made ourselves a little fortress,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
everyone, both outside and inside the country, were like, "Well, this is good short term, but we can't just be
Can't be locked
isolated
in.
forever."
Yeah.
And so they said, "Okay, well, we'll let some people from Australia in, and we'll see how that goes." And then one bloody turkey from Australia came along, and it turns out they were holidaying alongside the Delta variant. And then they released, not unlike, you might release a pest, they released the Delta variant into the community, and our government said, we won't be having that. And after one community case, they sent the entire country back into their houses. And naturally, because I live in Auckland, New Zealand, the most populous of the cities, this is where the main concentration of the community outbreak is.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like we're approaching the 50th day in our house, and the New Zealand lockdown is the most stringent of all the lockdowns.
Yeah. Because because you were stringent at the beginning and it worked, and now you're like, okay, we loosened up for a moment, and now we're in trouble. So now we have to crack down twice as hard as we did at the beginning.
Honestly, it's tearing. We were so self-satisfied and really into like patting ourselves on the back.
True, yeah.
Like we deride
mission accomplished banner on the
yeah. We deride individual achievement, but if we work together to achieve something as a collective, namely staying in our house for COVID-19 to get stamped out, we love to pat each other on the back and say we did it.
That's good. Are you guys doing the banging pots and pans?
No, we didn't.
Did you guys see that though?
We didn't make a big show of celebrating our public servants. We sort of like to think that our actions of actually staying at home.
Yes, that is much better. Public servants and those first responders and the frontline workers are like, banging pots and pans is fine, but maybe like get a vaccine, maybe like stay at your house or whatever, Don't have that party.
I wonder how many people who banged on all those pots and pans now refuse to get the vaccine.
Yeah, guaranteed some bangers.
What the I don't know. I'd love to see the connective tissue between their thinking of celebrating the NHS or whatever the National Health Services in Canada, and then sort of defying and infuriating the very same people by wanting to research the ingredients of a vaccine.
It's a little bit nutty. So do you have many of those anti-vaxxer, anti-masker people?
We're kind of lucky in New Zealand that we are small enough that like disinformation can't quite reach a critical mass of people to spread in a meaningful way. But certainly, like, this is the longest lockdown we've been in Auckland.
Right,
and you can see the edges are starting to fray just a little bit. And there's like, we've got some right-wing pastors who are all about people's liberties, who organised a sort of few thousand people protest in a big park over the weekend, which was
it's tough to see. It's happening here too, and it's just like because we're obviously on the other side of it. We can kind of see maybe the bigger picture or whatever. And some people are maybe a little bit sheepy, following certain disinformation or misinformation that has been put in front of them. So it's hard to say, but people who should get vaccinated. You should be wearing your masks. I'm gonna go and say that.
Hell yeah. I'm double vaxxed and
Woo!
I mask up to the nines, baby.
Hell yeah.
I don't show any skin. I've gone full brethren.
Oh, wow.
I'm just teasing. I walk nude save for a mask.
So this is your guys' first taste of lockdown. So we up over here have already been through it, right? We were already locked down for months. We came out of it, and now we're just sort of dealing with the repercussions of that. So now you guys are in your lockdown. Is your edges fraying, or are you going to be okay?
I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it's impossible to forecast, and I've actually, because what I am capable of doing to help is as small as staying at home for as long as I'm told, and not being a defiant sort of guy.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to be in a position where that is an issue for me. I have I've tried not to form too many opinions or engage in dialogue with people who have heavy-handed opinions, because I feel like that's the root cause for a lot of anxiety and frustration, is assuming you know better or know anything more, or speculating about what the outcomes might be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, I hope we'll be okay. I think right now the strategy is get the vaccination rate up high enough that we can, achieve a version of herd immunity.
Yeah, reopen a little bit with some caveats. Just get a little bit of normalcy back for you guys.
But it's just ridiculous the number of people who have decided to have very confident and outspoken opinions about all of this. Virtually, apart from, I'd say, less than 1% of the population have ever even anticipated or bothered to think about this circumstance.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop, grossly unqualified people such as myself having very hardline opinions and takes.
Yeah.
That, if no one listens or people disagree with, they take as an attack on their freedoms, which is, it's just absurd to me. I don't really know what the outcome of this will be. And, I think it's reasonable to have everyone's going to have a healthy amount of skepticism about nearly any government. But I don't know. What I really want to do is just get everyone to get a fucking needle in their arm so I can go and meet a friend for a beer.
That is right, Guy. We just want people to just get the stupid needle and just don't worry about what's in it. They've been working on it for a decade. They didn't just come up with it. That's what people are like, oh, how did they just come up with this in 3 months? We're like, no, well, the science had been working on this because they knew something like this was going to come, and they had to be ready. And guess what? It did. And guess what? They were. So it's just this damn Delta variant. We'll just tweak the little thing. We'll get a booster. Everything will be fine. You just got to be looking on the bright side.
I mean, all I want to do is have a beer with my friends and do some stand-up comedy.
True, yeah. Your industry has been hit among the hardest industries, the live entertainment industry. So that it's so tough. We don't know how it's gonna bounce back. How is it's gonna play out? We currently in Toronto right now, shows are back on. With socially distanced, in quotation marks.
Socially distanced.
I don't know how socially distanced you can be in a little room. They put the tables 6 feet apart, and then you take your mask down when you're drinking, and then you're laughing.
Indoor stand-up comedy is a very challenging place to a pandemic is COVID-19. The Delta variant specifically is very well positioned to wreak havoc on the
comedy shows,
that industry.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I joined when I was. This is just a byproduct of doing comedy, but I joined, there was a Facebook group when I was living in Toronto years ago called the Toronto Stand-Up Community or whatever the hell it was called,
Epic
And it was
Facebook
always,
group, legendary Facebook group.
yeah, it was always a great place to follow dramas between open micers I've never heard of. And, like, even as the
Yeah.
years between my living in Toronto
You can still keep up with some drama.
I would still occasionally dip in just to see people attacking each other because I thought it was kind of funny.
It's kind of funny.
I know it's an unhealthy instinct, but it's also simply irresistible. And then last year I remember watching a guy who was like, he was super anti-lockdown, and he was putting on, this is in Toronto, he was putting on a lot of comedy shows in the park.
Yeah.
And he sort of like became this self-modeled free speech or, freedom of rights guy. And I remember seeing that and being like, this fucking guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to dignify him by naming him.
No, yeah, it's good to keep up with TSUC on Facebook. You definitely try to get in there. You have to get approved, but once you get in, it's juicy.
Once you're in, they don't kick you
They don't know.
out.
There's too many people to keep track. Actually, I don't know if that page is still going on. I don't know if it got shut down or not.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so quick story. My parents traveled to your lovely nation in, I think, around 1990. I was just a wee lad. I think I was 8 or so.
I would have been 2.
You'd have been 2? Oh, that's cool. And I'm pretty sure they went to Christchurch, so you would have been there. You would have been around.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad went, and my dad went with like a local hockey team, and they went and they played a New Zealand hockey team on this like epic long game. Like they were trying to do a world record attempt for a longest game or something. I don't know.
Longest game of field hockey?
Oh, regular ice hockey.
Oh, ice hockey. Okay.
Yeah.
Regular hockey. No, in New Zealand we call field hockey regular hockey.
Right.
And when it's ice hockey, that's when you have to say put an adjective in front of the noun, because that is the unusual one for us.
Right, yeah. So I have a little bit of a connection. I didn't get to go, but I have a bunch of like souvenirs that they brought back. So I have
you do.
all these like all these like little things around my house. I have like these little Kiwis, like these little figurines of Kiwis dressed up as different things. Like one's like a little referee, a little boxing guy.
One of the things about our native bird is that it likes nothing more than dressing up as various different livelihoods.
That's right.
Role playing. Yeah.
That's right. That is what it's there for. And what else do I got? I've just found that cool All Blacks hat. I think I sent you a picture of that. Cool, old foam snapback All Blacks hat. Remember my dad got a ton of All Black stuff. He was super into All Blacks gear. Yeah, it was just really cool. And then I found a bunch of old postcards, I guess, that they had sent out. So it's like you tear the postcard off, but you keep like the receipt that shows like what the postcard looked like and who you sent it to.
I love that.
Yeah, really neat, cool stuff, and all these coasters that showed like what was the big thing? The Sky Tram. There's like you go up in
Sky Tower.
Sky Tower. Yeah, what's the thing where you take like a gondola? Is that a thing?
Oh, the luge. There's like in Queenstown and
might have been.
Rotorua, there's like a gondola you catch up, and then at the top of it, there's like a luge.
Okay.
You've got the luge. You know what a luge is? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Go down. Yeah, very cool. So I always had a fondness for the New Zealand for the country, and I always like to see New Zealand people out and about doing their thing on the world stage.
I always felt a kinship with Canada from New Zealand, I think, because I always imagined, and it turns out accurately, in my opinion, that the dynamic between Australia and New Zealand and Canada and America would be similar.
Oh, okay, yeah, like the little neighbor.
Yeah, the little sort of less confident,
more polite, perhaps.
Yes, quite. And yeah, I feel, as someone who's spent time in all 4 of the places in question, I feel like there's a certain accuracy to that,
like a similarity, between the relationships. So your relationship with Australia is good now that you're a big Australian comedy star now. Yeah,
I would love to go back. I mean, I don't know, man. It's been a fucking. I used to I was lucky in that there's a sort of, in New Zealand and Australia, there's a festival circuit that you can work between the two nations, where it's like you can build an hour every year and every other year if you want. And you can spend a few months performing it. And if it goes well, then you can set it up so that it's like an annual part of the year.
Yeah, get booked and you have a recurring schedule where you're like,
and
these months I'm
sort of
working.
established that, and like, you wind up making so many great friends over there, and I really love the scene, and like Australian comics is so funny. Like, oh fuck, man, Australians are really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I haven't been, like I can't go anywhere.
You can't go. You can't even leave your house.
You can't leave New Zealand at the moment because we have a broken MIQ system, managed isolation quarantine system, which means that New Zealanders, like even New Zealanders who are abroad, who are living anywhere else, they have to enter a lottery to secure a spot to spend 2 weeks quarantining in a hotel before they're allowed to rejoin the community.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are taking it seriously, and you know what? I like to see that, Guy. I like to see it.
We are protecting our most vulnerable.
That's right.
We do love to do that, but we're taking it so serious.
Taking it super seriously, but better to do the harsh lockdown at the beginning and reap the benefits than dealing with like the overloaded ICUs like Alberta.
That's right. And we did do that, and we loved it. We had such a good time.
Yeah, you guys were killing it.
Our liberties and sort of advertising them on social media to antagonize the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, now, Stephen, what we're experiencing is the boot being on the other foot.
Right. Some sort of comeuppance.
Yes, and the boot doesn't look nearly so good when it's on the other foot.
No. And now all these people in America and over here are going out for beers with their friends.
Yeah. What we really want is the boot to... Well, we want everyone to be wearing boots, I suppose. But it was incredibly preferable when the boot was on our foot.
Yeah.
Or,
feels way better.
It does.
It's a snug fit.
Precisely.
All right, Guy. Well, we're starting to wind her down, but I still got a few more things that I want to talk to you about.
I wish you would. I'd love to know what memories you have of us meeting in Toronto and whether or not I bombed the gig you saw.
I don't remember you bombing. I think I more clued into you that you were funny in conversation. Like you were cool hanging out with the guys or whatever, Foisey and whoever else was there, SPA. And you were like, holding your own. So maybe you did it to crush it in the cabaret space, but you crushed it in the social situation. And I was like, okay, that's a good guy. I need to immediately follow him on Twitter. Hopefully he follows me back, kind of thing. Like make a good friend connection because he's from New Zealand, so he's gonna eventually go back to New Zealand. And if I don't make Facebook friends with him now, he's gonna be gone forever. Maybe he doesn't start a world famous podcast and end up coming back.
Well, you because I don't remember. I guess we followed one another. This was early days of probably not universally speaking Twitter, but like
no, it was like 2012 days.
Twitter being a defining feature of comedy. It was fairly early, and I remember following you, but through the year, decade almost, you are responsible for. You yourself published some very funny tweets, and you're like you obviously you dissect words and you sort of find double meanings, and you're very good with wordplay.
Correct.
But you also are this like unrelenting treasure trove of very, very funny retweets, which are like some of them are historic. Some of them are like, it's a hilarious tweet I've never seen before from like 2009.
Yeah, I got the memory for the good tweets. And I'll pop them back in the feed every once in a while.
Those tweets?
Usually it's like someone who I know, and it's like one of their classic tweets, and it'll be I'll just like think about it, or I'll be thinking about them, talking to them or something. I'll be like, oh, this tweet needs to come back around again, and maybe somebody missed it the first time or something like that. And that's been the benefit of like becoming friends with a bunch of very funny people on Twitter and in real life, because then you have this treasure trove of tweets coming up, plus all the super hilarious ones that they've done before that you could retweet a million times and it's still funny like every single time.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And whenever I see a Guy Mont retweet of a retweet, I'm like, yeah, I did it. I got to Guy, because I know that when you retweet it, it's like he must have really liked it. It's like you're a pretty big Twitter account guy. You know what's good. Managing your brand.
Is there such a thing? I think Twitter's so fucking stupid.
Yeah, Twitter sucks and it's on the way out, but
I try to have the most boring Twitter account. I try to tweet the most like like worthless, disposable, unhelpful observations or comments.
Yeah, but that's your
like
brand. That's your Twitter brand.
Yeah.
So if you get it, you get it. And I think it's funny when you do that.
Yeah. I just try to distill it to the least interesting account.
Yeah, well, it's working.
But then I counterbalance that by retweeting stuff I find very funny.
Yeah, that works. All right. So I guess you did have a podcast. You are a podcaster yourself. You've done many episodes of podcasts. You had a podcast.
Yeah, man. This is not my first time in conversation on my microphone.
Not your first time speaking into a Shure microphone.
Yeah.
So how did that? I guess it was long after you left Toronto, made it back to New Zealand, and you had to think of the worst idea of all time, and then you just came up with it.
It was not so long after I left Toronto. It was like 2014. I came back to New Zealand, and I had this show hosting like a public broadcaster. Do you have we have TVNZ, which is like our BBC.
We have CBC.
CBC, yeah. So they had a digital youth channel that they'd launched, and I came back to host a late night, sort of a nightly, every weeknight talk show on it for an hour. But it was severely underfunded. It was just me and one friend.
That's cool.
For creating and filling an hour of content every night.
Love it.
And it was, such incredible on-the-job training. And we've filled the segments with friends who are comics, funny people, and one of them was Tim Batt, who came on to review public toilets. There was a segment called the Loo Review. He wore a suit, he brought a briefcase, he prepared slideshows, he'd done the most amount of work ever, and probably at the funniest angle. And my response to that was I thought it'd be very funny if I derided him and sort of said that I don't respect what he's doing and he's sullying, the broadcast. And we sort of set up this comic dynamic.
Yeah.
And it was my favorite part of doing this late night show was this part with Tim. And after 6 months of doing the show, the CEO of TVNZ changed, and the entire funding for not just our show, but for the entire channel, which was a subset of TVNZ called TVNZU, the letter U, got cut.
Oh, no.
And so we were out on our ass, and Tim had a history in radio production. He produced a drive time radio show on commercial, on the airwaves. And we realized we had some sort of chemistry. And so we thought, well, we want to keep doing something together. We don't know what's got the lowest barrier to entry, which was podcasting.
Yeah.
And we came up with, reviewing this, a movie, an open-ended movie review podcast where the movie doesn't change, the worst city of all time. And we're going to do Grown Ups, but then we thought it'd be funnier to do a sequel. What's funnier than a movie that shouldn't have been made necessarily as the sequel to that same movie.
Just genius idea, I must say.
Yeah. And then we did it. And it's sort of like, we never would have anticipated it achieving any sort of success. Like initially, and this is a great instance of committing to the bit, we're just like, well, we'll just keep going because it's funny. Yeah. And if we make however many episodes of this and no one ever listens, that'll be funny. And also it will be funny if it ever does get discovered, because people would discover it after we're finished, or
yeah.
We've got 40, you could discover this podcast where these people have reviewed the same movie 40 times, and there's this backlog of 40 episodes.
Yeah.
But it's sort of what happened is one of Paul Scher's How Did This Get Made listeners put him onto it, and he shouted us out on an episode of that. And from there, he drove a lot of listeners, and then word of mouth sort of spread.
Yeah. And now you're the boys, you're friends with Patty Schwartz.
That's right. Yeah. And then, neither of us would have anticipated the stupidest thing we did becoming
what you're known for.
The most successful thing we do.
True. But that must have been great. So how many seasons did you end up doing of that?
We did sort of, we're still going kind of. Sorry, I was just having a sip of my drink. We did 3 initially. We did Grown Ups 2.
Grown Ups 2, Sex and the City 2.
Sex and the City 2. Then we did We Are Your Friends. And then
We Are Your Friends, right.
That, but exhausted, and we said, hold on, so I'm just shutting the door now. we said let's finish and not do this anymore. But then that's when and not long after then, I actually can't remember the chronology, but basically we were pitching an idea to make it a TV show around the States, and it got made into a pilot for YouTube Red, popular streaming platform YouTube Red that is still going.
Incredibly popular pay-to-stream platform YouTube Red, yeah.
Yeah, it's like YouTube, but you pay.
It's like Quibi, but on your computer.
Yeah, and so we made that, and then we made that in New York, and we got these visas that we could work and live there, and I stayed on, and Tim went home, and then after like 6 months of being apart, we realized we weren't really catching up, and we missed each other, and we're so broken, or our relationship, our friendship is so broken that we rekindled it by picking back up the podcast concept and watching Sex and the City 1.
Oh no, did you? That's great. I gotta pick that season up.
And then after that, we're just about to finish a year of watching all of these softcore porn films, which, like, I think we've made several serious missteps in our career.
Well,
but we, as mentioned at the start of the podcast, we are nothing if not committed. Like, my byline for our podcast is that we've got more integrity than talent, and if we say we're watching something, we are watching it.
Yes. And I think that is true. The committing to the bit, like no one else, like other people probably maybe wanted to start something like that, and then they got to, like, most podcasts don't get past the third episode. There's like a stat, right? Like 90% of podcasts or more don't get past the third episode. Imagine if it was you have to watch the same movie before every episode. Imagine how many episodes it would have got to with anyone else other than Tim and Guy. And I'm assuming it was 3 or less because that's nuts. But you did it, and now that you've done it, does it feel like, like a notch on your belt? Like, obviously, hindsight, you're happy that you did it, but like in the throes of it, you ever go back and listen to one that's like the 45th episode or whatever of a season, and where you're clawing your eyes out?
No, it's lived experience. I have that pain within me.
Right, you don't need to relive it.
Tim is the technical component of the podcast. I'm just a guy who shows up. I've never re-listened to any of it.
Oh, good, yeah. That's already too much doing it once, I think.
Yeah, I think that's enough.
Yeah, but it is a great podcast. Everyone, if you haven't listened to it, there's many hours now. You can go, you can binge years worth of Guy's life in a month, and I think that's what happened to me. I picked up it was the We Are Your Friends when I dipped back in. Like, I listened to the first seasons as they went, and then I dipped out and then dipped back into We Are Your Friends and listened to them all in a row, and it was like my inner monologue had a New Zealand accent and was like you and Tim's voice, and was like, okay, I'm listening to this podcast too much, then I had to cut it. I had to cut it off.
We get a lot of that. I think it's quite an enjoyable way to listen to it is to binge, just because like you're and this podcast now spans 7 years.
Oof.
So like it's outlasted relationships. Tim, within the podcast, like we've moved countries. Tim has become married and a father.
Wow. Congratulations to Tim. He's gotten several knives.
Yeah. It's a very bizarre sort of time capsule for a very specific period of our lives, which is, I don't know that I'll ever revisit it, but I do think it's interesting to just like publicly document and release that.
Yeah.
And just have it existing in the world that, like, as a file that will outlive virtually all of humanity.
Yep. Yeah, pretty neat. Your voice watching the movie. Gonna be talk about David Spade or whatever forever.
Yeah, man. I want to be remembered for talking about David Spade.
All right, buddy. Very cool. All right, well, Guy, we've done it. We've cracked that magical hour mark, which I like to keep the podcast around. So I don't have too many more notes. Thank you so much for taking the time on this Monday afternoon for you, Sunday night for me. Isn't that wild? It did mess me up, but you're like, okay, Monday at 1. I'm like, okay, so that's That's Monday night for me, right? No, it's Sunday night.
Yeah.
You fool! It's Sunday night.
This is the arrogance of anyone who lives outside of an unusual time zone.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love talking to the future.
Yeah, man. Do not check your mail tomorrow morning.
Oh shit!
Same.
Thank you for the heads up. Oh, Marty, I can't know about the future.
Yeah, do you remember that sitcom Early Edition?
Oh yeah.
That was great, huh? That guy got the paper.
It was such a great premise, such a simple premise. It works great every week. Like, it's great. It's like the middle of Groundhog Day. That's the part that everyone likes. You just want to watch the middle of Groundhog Day week to week.
Absolutely. I don't know. I remember that, and he was always like, he took it so serious. He always would go and stop crises.
Yeah.
And his friend, who was a sports reporter, was just like, "Tell me the fucking score, man. I want to make money, baby."
That's funny. I didn't know about that. And it's the Friday Night Lights guy, right? Like the coach.
Yeah. So that really sort of handsome, put upon looking leading man.
Yeah. Classic stuff. All right, Guy. Well, thank you so much for joining me and being a friend of the show eventually. 10 years in the making since that fateful couch sit in Comedy Bar. And
yeah, man. It's one that all the boys still talk about.
We all talk about it. Yeah, me and the boys. We talk about it all the time. And it was great meeting you then. It's great talking to you now. Congratulations on all your success. I loved you on Spontaneous Nation.
You're a sweetheart, Stephen. You appear to be across a wide array of comedy materials, and for that, I tip my hat, good sir. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you, and I tip my hat back to you, and good luck with the rest of your lockdown. And as I do, I end the podcast with the theme as we say our goodbyes. So thanks, Guy. Have a great Monday afternoon and evening, and a great week, and a great year.
Hey, you too.
And all the best to you and your lovely relationship lady.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Guy, take it easy.
Bye.
Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Guy. Follow him on Twitter at Guy_Mont. And check out the links in the show notes and search his name in your podcast app for a fun time. If you're a new listener, why thank you. If you're a New Zealand listener, please let me know. I kiwit to hear from you. If you like, you can check out all the old Friends of the Show episodes at www.stevenwskinner.com or find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Potty Pitch. The 10,000th 5-star review gets a coupon for Sizzler. If you like podcast Twitter accounts, check out at FOTS Pod. That's the show's Twitter account. And you may find me at SkinnerSteven on Twitter. That's my Twitter account for posting Twitters. Special thanks to Ruby Coast for the music and Kyle I. Davidson for the theme. And thank you so much for listening. I'm Stephen W. Skinner. Have a great one.